Hey, can everybody hear me? Okay, we're almost there to kick things off. There's one thing I wanted to ask before we get started. We're doing some filming in here today, and is there anyone in here, anyone at all, that has an objection to being on film?
No, he does.
Okay, we figured there would be somebody in the crowd that would be that.
Hey, there's some guy behind Steve. There's some guy behind you that doesn't want to be on film.
Okay, right there. Well, my name is Stephen Major, and I am the founder and director of operations of Extreme Expeditions Northwest LLC. And we are an outdoor adventure company with one aim. And that aim is to find definitive proof that Bigfoot exists. And when I say that, I don't mean blurry photos or pictures of trees and things like that. I mean actually having a face-to-face encounter with Mr. Big and getting that definitive proof. And that is our goal. And over the last couple of years, we've been on the coast of Alaska, in Canada, Port Chatham, and then recently, just this last year, in Stevens County. And here we are today. We're very pleased to be in Pend Oreille County and be in Metaline Falls. And we thank you all for coming. We're really looking forward to talking to you guys when we get to the town hall portion. Right now, kind of how things are going to go is we're going to have one of our speakers had to cancel. He wasn't feeling well, and so it was kind of a good thing. He probably stayed home. But that was Kevin Llewellyn from the BFRO, who would have contributed a lot to this. And we're sad that he's not here because he's done a lot of investigations in the area and could talk about recent things that have occurred here. So each speaker is going to come up, and they're going to do about 40 to 45 minutes, and then we'll have a little time there for you if you have a burning desire, you have a question you need to ask or something like that. We have microphones on either side of the stage here, you can ask a question. And then we'll take a short break if necessary, and then we'll go, Adam Davies will be going second, Dr. Alley will be going first. And we'll roll things along, and then at 2, we look forward to hearing from you. And before we get started, I just wanted to bring Bill Basson up here, and I thought that it would be a really neat thing for those of you that aren't familiar with this area, like I'm really not that familiar with the history of it. He was going to talk about that for about 5 minutes. So can you come down, Bill?
Yeah!
Hi, folks, and welcome to Metaline Falls, Metaline, and the North Pend Oreille County. Little history of this county up here is it's really it's a tough county up here for any explorers or anything. We had a explorer about 1860, a Thompson, that was trying to find a way to go up the river around back down to the Columbia, and so he had an Indian guide that was going to take him up the river and everything. He got up here to the Metaline Falls in this area up here, and the Indian guy stopped. And Mr. Thompson said, the Indian guy, well, what's going on? He says, well, these rapids and the swift water here. And he goes, well, are we going to go? And he goes, I've never been up past this before. And he says, I'm not going. So, that's the original people that came up here were some of the fur trappers, of course, from the French and stuff like this. So this area really has not been well explored. They had early mining coming up here. Gold miners, Chinese, they were coming up from California to look for gold up here. There's a little bit of gold that has been found up here. I'm a prospector, so I'll tell you there's no gold up here. Hey, you know, you can't give away all your secrets. Anyway, so the history of this area, like I said, it's really rough. 1910 is about when the first populace came up here. They brought a railroad up here. A little bit more of the history that it's a lead and zinc mines up here that they opened it up and so it was a worldwide production. Washington State worldwide production for the mining and stuff up here. So basically, they didn't have any transportation to get the material down where they needed to get it, so it was all hand carted until they brought the railroad up here about 1910. 1912, this is the Cutter Theater. 1912 is when this theater was built, so you know, what a beautiful place to have a Bigfoot a Bigfoot town hall today, you know, and you folks, we've got folks that have come from all over the place and up in this area. So one of the things I'm going to go through the list here. Announcements. Okay, please keep your tickets for the dinner. We're having a meatloaf dinner. There'll also be, we're going to take and raffle some stuff off today. There's some prizes outside that we're going to raffle, raffle, I guess it says raffle. Okay, we're also going to auction off some stuff. So Mr. Bigfoot in the back, he's just a guest, so don't get excited about, you know, taking him home. There is a smaller Bigfoot that's out there that we're going to see about somebody taking home today. Okay, and of course smoking, please smoke outside the building off to the right, you know, not on the front door. And also our guests are going to be happy to take and sign your books that you want to buy. They'll be glad to take and sign them personally for you, so you know, don't think that you're going to miss out on getting them to meet the gentlemen that are here today. Very, very dynamic speakers. Let's see, what else? Yeah, I'm excited. I'll tell you a little how this happened. My friend Steve and I, we talked a little bit about Bigfoot, of course, and so he was saying, well, is there any sightings up in this area? I said, well, you know, I've heard of a few, and I've experienced something of a vocal, so I said, I think there's probably something up here. So he said, okay, well, I'm going to send out some information. So he sends out some information, and all of a sudden he's getting all these emails back. He's going, well, how about coming up here and talking to people? And I said, well, we could probably arrange something like that. So we got together, and I talked to the staff here at the Cutter, and they said, well, that would be interesting. We'll see about getting this set up. Can you do it? And I said, well, we'll see what will happen. So we sent out the information to people, and look at the crowd today. Boy, you guys are just great. I'm ecstatic that everybody showed up here. You know, it's that jitters, you know, is there going to be people really believe Bigfoot or want to come and see? But I see that there is some people who are here today. Thank you very much. There's also drinks at the bar. We're gonna have short intermissions. So the speakers, as Steve said, they're gonna take some time to speak. If somebody needs to get up, please. We're gonna keep the lights on in here so it's easy for everybody to see. And then we're going to dim the lights when we're having the speakers do their PowerPoints. Let's see, about anything else. I think that's pretty much, let me see if I think I pretty much got everything that I need to say. I thank you very much for coming all the way up to Metaline Falls. We hope that you enjoy our country up here. We'd love to see you come back up in the summer. We've got a lot of places up here to camp. We want you to come up here, enjoy it, and find Bigfoot for us, because, you know, we are hoping that we can find him soon so that we can get this mystery over with. So, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Bill. I appreciate it. Okay.
One more thing. There's attention, out in the parking lot, there's a black Ram truck with its parking lights on. I've got jumper cables and turn
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Thanks again. Okay, for our first speaker is Dr. J. Robert Alley, who has come all the way from Oregon, and just before that he's been in Alaska for many, many years, and it was the University of Alaska. And he's also an author of a very famous book called Raincoat Sasquatch. If you've never read it, it's tough to get hands on it because the book's in such demand. And he happens to have one today, and he also his recent book, Bigfoot Encounters in Southeast Alaska. So let's have a good applause.
Thank you very much. It's a real honor to be here. And it's a pleasure to be in such a beautiful area that when I woke up, I looked out the window and I thought, oh my God, I've got to fly from Ketchikan to Port. Oh, I'm not in Alaska. I don't know, it's raining. It feels like Ketchikan. Look at all that rock face. So it just very much feels at home. I used to work in Washington as a physical therapist when I moved from Calgary to Washington and Oregon in 1988. And I missed it all the while that I was in Alaska. Before that, I worked with native populations as a physical therapist and a chiropractor and an anthropologist and an EMT and a fish and wildlife tech, anything I could do to be in the bush. So at medical school, where I studied physical therapy at the University of Manitoba, which is straight north of Minneapolis, about 7 hours, I was lucky enough to be both an anthropology, archaeology student, zoology student while I was doing my pre-med, pre-dental, whatever I was going to do. And I had this crazy job where I was illustrating artifacts, arrowheads and so on, for the archaeologists at the university. So I was I was a grad student starting anthropology just the year I went to the med school, my last year at Arts and Science. I was down at the Fort Garry campus and I was just really doing illustration in there, illustrating the artifacts. But there were all these bone collections and skeletons all over the place. It's an anthropology lab, right, after all. There was a knock at the door, and it was a crime reporter and an RCMP constable. And I kind of looked, well, hi, can I help you? Well, we're looking for any anthropology staff that are on call or available this weekend to come out and we have an investigation. We'd like someone who can do some forensics. Do you have anyone who's familiar with human, forensics, tracks and so on? I thought, well, I'd already passed all my anthropology and I studied physical anthropology and studied human anatomy. I said, well, I guess I'll lock up and I'll come with you. We drove out to Portage Prairie, Manitoba, which is kind of like Glasgow, Montana, I don't know. And there's a native reservation there, some kind of mixed parkland, aspen and spruce and so on. Native family at a farmhouse that had a reported sighting of a Bigfoot just outside their window one evening. And what the constable wanted me to look at was a track that his crew actually had covered up. And it was a large track. I recall it was about 18.5 inches long. And I looked, its length would not have been outside the range of variability for any of us if our pituitaries had gone haywire and we were Andre the Giant or one of these people with osteomegaly or acromegaly. And however, it was much wider than that. So it wasn't human. It was outside the range of human variability as far as the heel width goes. It just couldn't have been Homo sapiens, even with a pituitary disorder. Right then, I realized something was up. And this is the cover of a book I wrote in 2003. It basically was my anthropology grad paper. I lost my grad paper. Cliff Barrington found it. He's down in Portland at the Bigfoot Museum where these books are. A newer one I'd written. But at the time that I was an anthropology student, until I'd been out with the RCMP and with the crime reporter, this is what I thought Sasquatches were. And you have stories from all across Canada, all the Native and the United States. Wherever there are forests, you have Native American oral traditions of different kinds of creatures, but all somewhat the same in some ways. And I had the standard approach, this is myth, legend, folklore. But when I saw that track, a thought hit me. And it was, what did I study about human evolution? And I was raised, pretty conservative. Dad was a kind of Methodist Sunday school teacher, high school principal, and Mom was a high school librarian and Episcopal Presbyterian. So I had a conventional, my Judeo-Christian upbringing. Thinking Old Testament, are there any stories? Giants in the land, that sort of thing. And I'd studied evolution, human evolution, as a anthropology student. And I was trying to integrate all this. And I realized there were some big giant fossils out there from whatever date, Pleistocene, Pliocene, Asian giants, Gigantopithecus, giant human fossils called Meganthropus. And I didn't try to integrate it, but the thought occurred to me that maybe with the land bridge, with all the camels and horses and everything going one way or the other, maybe some of these characters had gotten over to North America. Certainly the natives said that they had company in the forest. And I just want to share a little bit about that with you now, if I can, both from Canada and Alaska. This is buckwheat. Buckwheat on the west coast of British Columbia among the Kwakiutl people, which is spelled Kwakiutl, but pronounced Kwagist, who speak a language, Kwakwakawak, and it's a west coast language, it's not Salish. They have an oral tradition of female hairy-covered giants called Sanakwa, and their husbands called buckwheat. And this is a buckwheat without the hair. A lot of them, it's a reproduction of one of the originals. The hair, they usually use horsehair in the masks. They wouldn't put buckwheats on their totems when they had family history, but they would put the female on the totems. They put the Tsunakwa. And if you go to any of the museums in Seattle, Vancouver, Victoria, you'll see the female. Or you go up and down the coast, and she's usually portrayed with her eyes closed, her lips pursed. She whistles. The breasts are portrayed. She's black, unless you go to Victoria, you'll see her holding an infant, Tsunakwa, an infant's buckwheat. He's brown. If you had a chimpanzee female holding her, interestingly, if you had a chimp female holding her offspring, she'd be black, but he would be almost reddish brown, because primates, when they're young, are lighter colored than when they're mature. If you go further up the coast to Prince Rupert or to Ketchikan, where you find Tsimshian people or Nishka people, they have oral traditions of a Sasquatch-like creature called Ba'ush, which is almost like buckwheat, but it's a different kind of, they call it ape, an ape, a monkey, a Sasquatch, a Bigfoot, anything that imitates man, like a primate. So that's their term for buckwheat. And he's not too supernatural. Tsunakwa was said to steal children. But her husband wasn't, it was the female who would steal the children. And Tsunakwa had a bit of a boogeyman function too. Ba'ush, among the Prince Rupert, BC, and Metlakatla, Alaska natives, is really pretty much a Bigfoot without too much supernatural attribute. Do a gravity check. Around 1900, Charles Edenshaw, a Haida, British Columbia Haida. Now, the Haidas are Canadian and American. So about 300 years ago, some of them emigrated from the Queen Charlotte Islands, also called Haida Gwaii because it's autonomous and self-governing, from British Columbia up to Prince of Wales Island in Alaska. And they kind of, I won't say kicked out the Tlinkits from the southern half of the island, but they had wars. And there are two populations of Haida, some at Heidelberg and some at Kasan on Prince of Wales Island, where they continue to have belief in their name for Bigfoot or Sasquatch is Gagit. And Gagit can be portrayed like this, as Charles Edenshaw carved in 1900, or in this reproduction without the toothpicks around the mouth that represent sea urchin spines. Doing okay? All right. There's water around if you need it. So this is a Gagit mask. And Gagits, again, they didn't have any, to the Haidas, they still don't have really any supernatural attributes. They're just pretty much like a Bigfoot, flesh and blood Bigfoot or Sasquatch. I'm not going to go into the Tlingit Kushtika. That's a transformational, shape-shifting kind of Sasquatch. But the Tlinkits in Ketchikan, Juneau, Ketchikan, Wrangell, Petersburg, Klawock, Prince of Wales Island, Juneau, Cake, and Hoonah used to have multiple names for Bigfoot-like creatures. Hootslam is a name that natives that mentioned this in Rainbow Sasquatch in 2003. It really just meant Bigfoot in Tlingit. Hoos meaning foot, Slan meaning big. By the way, if there are any natives here, I just want to thank you for coming in. Generically, every tribal group and First Nation I've had contact with has been really helpful in trying to help me understand something that is very much part of their original oral tradition and culture, and in many ways a connection with the natural ecosystem, which any subsistence culture will value. So hunters and fishermen, people who like to gather berries and so on, whatever traditional cultures, tribal groups you have in America, if you look for oral traditions of wild people, you'll find them associated with things like old growth, and native grandparents would be able to say, people that I've known would be able to tell their grandkids, you can hunt in that creek, but don't go up that creek. That's where the big people are, the forest people are. Leave it to them. Nowadays, we don't have too many grandparents telling their grandkids, hunt here, don't hunt there, or fish here, don't fish there. But it's a valuable thing, and it's helped the natives get along, I think, for the last, 10,000 years, with everything in their environment. And they've been successful. Obviously, they survived. Whatever their rules for behavior or getting along with whatever else is out there would be useful for us to at least listen to, even though we have our own ideas. So with great respect, I want to humbly thank all the native people I've ever had contact with for sharing their wisdom with me. Doesn't mean they all agree. Some people think this is dangerous, in a way some people say, they can be helpful. But it definitely is something that represents a bridge between us and nature. Could we start the slideshow? Maybe I should be going the other way with this. How's everybody doing? Anybody from out of state, raise your hand. Anybody from Oregon? Anybody from Canada? Anybody from Idaho? Idaho. Good. Thank you for coming. Anybody from anywhere else in the U.S.? Out of state? Mostly Washington? That's really good. How many of you are from Puget Sound or Cascades or East Side? West Side? Puget Sound, Seattle? A few? Good. Thanks for coming over. I've done a lot of research since '75 with the Lummies and with Sergeant Ken Cooper. He's passed on now, but he had some encounters with Sasquatches on the Lummi Reservation. I came down from Vancouver Island at the time with Rennie DeHinda, who's another old Canadian who's passed on. He was a Swiss Canadian researcher. He was always trying to shoot the damn things like that. She's going to be like that. And Sergeant Cooper didn't want to shoot any of these steetats that he was running into, or that all the Lummies were running into on the Nooksack River in 74 and 75, stealing and getting their fish stolen. People were seeing them. It was lucky no one got hurt. I have some stories. I'll get more information. I want to get right onto the slideshow. I worked in Alaska as a physical therapist with the Native corporations from 1992 when I built a house and lived up there. My ex, I was married to a federal officer, a medical officer, a military officer for 27 years. We raised a family there. She's alive and well in Nevada. Probably too many Canadian bagpipes and Sasquatches for her, but she's happy in Nevada. And we survived 17 feet of rain a year. We lived in old growth. We lived in a part of Ketchikan that was completely surrounded by old growth cedar. I had bears walking through my yard. I had deer all the time. I even had something scream outside the window so loud that the 8x8 window vibrated. My daughter came running upstairs. My wife woke up. What is that? I knew what it was. And I even had a sighting in Alaska with my kids, with my daughter who's 6 and my ex's boy who was 12. He has an IQ of 200. He didn't like what we saw. He crossed the highway in front of the car. He left within 2 years to finish his high school out of state. He couldn't wait to get out of Alaska. He's a fine young man. He's 30 now. He's a software engineer in New York. My daughter, she was 6 at the time. She'd seen that Goofy movie with the Bigfoot in it, you know, where Goofy and the Bigfoot are that old Disney movie. She's looking at what's walking on 2 legs, 75 yards in front of the vehicle, coming around the corner of Whipple Creek, 12 miles north of Ketchikan, March 1st, 1990, 8:05 p.m., light rain. Papa Bigfoot! And my stepson's looking like this. He's looking out the window, and he kept his eyes glued on it, right down to the black skin that you could see, the dark gray, almost black skin that you could see as it hightailed it into the bush at about 35 miles an hour. I've been to some Winterhawks games, haven't been to Spokane Chiefs games. I'm looking forward to seeing the Kootenay Ice, now Winnipeg Ice, come out here and get to some hockey games. I played hockey, and I was a trainer in the '88 Winter Olympics for both Americans and Canadians in Calgary. I'm looking forward to seeing some hockey. Good excuse to get back. But this thing, I would love to put it on skates and got it onto a hockey team, because that's the kind of defense that what's it called? Or if you park it in front of a goal, nobody ever scored because the whole goal would be blocked. Anyhow, we can switch to the next slide. Thanks, Bill. So this is a book on close encounters, mostly from BC, or excuse me, from Alaska, but 2 from BC and 1 from Washington and 1 from Ontario, Canada, that I have either sworn affidavits of witness for. One of them is my own personal British Columbia experience, which you can read about if you're curious. I was at night about from here to the door from what had been throwing stones on my tent every 5 minutes, and I thought it was a kid until I went outside with my flashlight. I thought it was a kid that had somehow got up the logging road without leaving tracks, because it hadn't rained on the logging road for the last week, just that fine dust. So I was puzzled, curious, pissed off. Anyway, next slide. So I've had my own personal, 2 personal, underwear changing moments. When you go to Alaska, you'll notice one thing. It looks just like this place, okay? As far as Southeast is concerned, once you get north of Prince William Sound and Anchorage, things level out a little bit, kind of thinking Montana. You get far enough north, it's like a cold Nevada or Arizona, it's all kind of flat, tundra, like up past the Brooks Range. We have so many native groups in Alaska, and everyone has a different name for Sasquatch or Bigfoot. If you were a Sasquatch, or a Bigfoot, and you lived in Alaska, and you didn't like the weather, you could do something very interesting. You could just you get on an elevator and go down to sea level where it's not freezing. And you could go along the shore, pick out some limpets or gumboots and chitons, and maybe some shellfish, or at a creek mouth you might get some cutthroat trout, maybe nail a deer, or dig up some sword fern roots. In the summertime, you could get away from the bugs and the flies and the no-see-ums and just go up to Alpine, where all the bucks are, where all the blacktail bucks are, and you get yourself some fresh venison or goat. So you've got a climate-changing thing that you can do. You don't have to take a plane to California or Mexico. Next slide, please. Now the coastal climate is a lot like Seattle or Victoria or Campbell River or Forks, Washington, and it's wet, as I mentioned. So it never really freezes. You can dump down snow, it'll melt in the morning. It's really just a lot like a chilly Seattle or Vancouver. And that's the gray area. And that's where you get the big trees. And this is where I did most of my research. But I've also been up to Kotzebue, Bethel. I've been all around. And I think you'll find that there are 5 ecosystems. We have Sasquatches reported from all over the state, even way up in the Arctic, where they've been observed chasing caribou. A sworn affidavit of witness and a lengthy letter from an Eskimo family, Inupiaq family. There are 2 kinds of Eskimo. They don't call themselves Eskimos. In the Arctic, you have Inupiaq. That's what you think of as Inuit. And then on the west coast, you have another kind of the language. The linguists call them Eskimoan speaking, but it's Yupik, which would be Bethel, okay, Kuskokwim, and they speak a few words are the same as the northern Inupiaq, but they both have their own Sasquatches. Inukpasaka giants, that's an old traditional thing. They don't have totems, but they do have the oral traditions, and they have modern reports. So the lady from Barrow that called me, Sally Skin, she said, my husband and my son saw it. There were 2 of them Long story short, I'll be in my next book. They were chasing away the caribou that my husband and my son were trying to shoot. It was a caribou migration they were trying to get. And the Sasquatches were messing with this. They were steering away the caribou. But something had ripped off their cabin. And it had broken into the meat cache, and it had taken geese, and it had taken other meat, and kind of wrecked the cabin. And wolverines, they don't get them there on the Mead River. Looking for my remote. Got a couple of remotes. But anyway, there you go. So that all here's Barrow, and that all happened here. And this is all tundra, okay? Like you have muskox and you have caribou, but and no trees. Which brings up another thing too. We'll talk about in a minute. This is all Athabascan, Dene. They're moose hunting people, okay? And they go right down into northern Canada and I should say central, like northern Manitoba, northern Saskatchewan, northern Alberta, the Yukon, southwest, northwest territories, and northern British Columbia. Next slide. So these are the names of the ethnic people, and they all have their own names for Sasquatch, and sometimes two names. So a whole bunch of names for these people, for these Athabascans. So these are all Athabascan people, and they all basically have a version of Bushman, which is a Sasquatch that will steal the women and the kids in spring, summer, and fall. And if you're Athabascan, you do not let your kids or wife or any women out of camp. They stay right in camp right through spring, summer, and fall. And the Bushmen are not tucking themselves away for the winter. So the Bushmen are hairy, they're big, they have various descriptions, but they're all Sasquatch-like or Bigfoot-like. They also make a sound. So here's the forested area. Here's the area where the forest tapering off. You run out of trees in a lot of these areas. And the natives say that all over North America you hear reports of Sasquatches making wood-knocking sounds. Well, there's no trees to knock on once you get far enough north. And the natives say, well, they still make these sounds that sounds like a rifle. We think some of them have rifles. Imagine saying, we think some Bigfoots have rifles. Well, that's a scary thought. But I've been doing some research on this, and I have little tiny hands. I'm just average. I don't have big curved Neanderthal hands with a crude metatarsal. Some people say Bigfoot and Sasquatches have hands like canoe paddles. But if you do that with a big set of hands, it'll sound like a 30-06 or a 338. And I kind of think that may be what they're doing in accounting for these sounds up there. So the Yupik have stories about Sasquatches. Most of the red and purple names are variations of things like Nantinuk. And my friend Steve has done research on the Kenai. Okay, the Kenai Peninsula here. These are kind of Eskimoan, Alutiiq people who hunt seal and fish. And this is where Port Chatham, Portlock used to be. And if you Google, in search of the Port Chatham Hairyman, Portlock Hairyman, Port Chatham Hairyman.
Yeah, Port Chatham is based Portlock, but Port Chatham's a better.
Right, if you can search for the Port Chatham Hairyman, to talk with Adam Davies or Stephen Majors about this later today. You will discover that around 1940, the whole community got airlifted or moved. They all just got up. They didn't want to. They had dead bodies being, headless bodies being floated down the creeks. There was the father of one family was killed by being struck over the back of the head with what was a big log or some piece of logging equipment, something bigger than a person could have lifted. There were reports of Nantinuks or Bigfoot being seen on the beach digging clams and howling at night. The whole community just moved over to Nanwala, and they've all got these stories today about that. Curiously, they kept a cabin. They kept the Nanwala Corporation kept a cabin for B&B hunting, fishing use for visitors over at Dogfish Bay, close right at the site, really essentially at the Portlock site. And I'm told by people who've done the investigation, Rob Roy Menzies and
several other people over there, that when they rent the cabin out, people come right back and say, we're not going back. We're not going to go hunting there anymore. In fact, we're not even going to stay for the rest because, well, who'd be throwing rocks at our cabin anyway? And certainly, you know, the natives are not wanting to get rid of their visitors or customers there. So rock throwing, it kind of reminds me of Dr. Jeff Meldrum's account, his experiences at Snow Grove Lake, Ontario, where rocks were thrown at that cabin. Next, please. This is Prince of Wales Island, Alaska, where I worked as a physical therapist. And the mountains are about 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 feet. It rains all the time. There are probably 20,000 black bears on this island. No grizzlies, just black bears. This is Prince of Wales, okay? This is Revilla Island. Can you hear me? This is Revilla Island here in Ketchikan, Alaska. It's here in Tongass Narrows. 8,000 people, Coast Guard base, native village, Saxman. The only inhabitants live along this stretch of the island. Okay, the road is from here to here. It's all otherwise uninhabited. Forest Service cabin you can go and stay at. You might see something interesting or hear something interesting. And Prince of Wales Island. We'll go into detail on Prince of Wales here in a bit. It was logged for Sitka spruce during World War II. And there are a lot of clear cuts on the northern half, but not on the southern half. Sasquatch reports from all over the island. Basically, when I wrote Raincoast Sasquatch, I had approximately 125 reports, 75 from Revilla and 75 from, 75 from both islands each, so about 150 or so from these two islands alone. Not to mention Gravina Island, where the airport is. This was where the bridge to nowhere was going to be. Anybody remember the bridge to nowhere? Okay. So we gave all our money to Katrina victims in Louisiana with the bridge money. Sarah Palin had a political football thing going on with Murkowski's and whatnot. No, the bridge never got built. If you go to Ketchikan and you're visiting town, you're having a heart attack, you have to get a helicopter to come to town, get you over to the airport to medevac you out to Seattle or wherever. But anyway, this is an Indian reservation. This is a net island. These are the Simshans I was telling you about, okay? Everything else is Tlingit, where they're kind of superstitious about Sasquatches and they think they've got to be shape-shifting. This is Prince of Wales, where the Haidas say, no, it's just wild man, Gagit, okay, with the sea urchin spines sticking out of the mouth. Next slide. So this is a Gagit, another Haida Sasquatch, and you can see the portrayal. The two pics represent sea urchin spines. They live on crabs, they live on sea urchins, they eat fish, they live, along the intertidal zone. They'll eat deer, they're omnivorous. They could kill a bear, a black bear. Next slide. So if you watch Monsters and Mysteries of Alaska on YouTube and you go home tonight and you watch that, you'll see two, I guess Woody was he's a friend of mine. He's a carver. I've known his whole family in Ketchikan for years. You'll see in the documentary they dramatized his encounter with a large male Sasquatch looking in the front window one night on Prince of Wales Island. And I'm going back there to do more research this year with Steve. We have a lot of reports from Prince of Wales Island. What you won't see in the documentary, from either his son Gary's perspective, Gary in the back seat, or Woody in the front passenger. He was too big to sleep behind the wheel. His sister was smaller and she was sleeping behind the driver's wheel. Woody's a big guy. And their subsistence, Tlingit hunters, was the female that Woody described holding an infant in her arms looking in the side window. So we have a depiction of Sasquatches as a family group, whether or not they have harems, and this guy might have been visiting one of his wives and her little guy, who knows what. Or they may be quite monogamous, we have no idea. But anyway, you have and this is what Woody had me draw. So, next slide, please. He was quite scared. Again, another detail of what he had me draw. I kind of worked off of some anthropology that I did with Java Man. Because there's a giant form of Java Man called Meganthropus that seems to have been a good candidate for, at 8 feet or 9 feet tall, seems to have been a good candidate for a human, not an ape, but a human ancestor of some Sasquatches. Not that there couldn't be a whole lot of different kinds of Sasquatches. You know, some were ape-like, some were human-like. Anyhow, yeah, next slide, please. Tamara, a nurse, an RN, who worked in Texas and in Ketchikan at the hospital, would come up every year. Her husband would go fishing at Connell Dam, and she would take a camera and go hiking while he was fishing. And I know the dam, and there's tons of Sasquatch reports there all over the time, all over the place. They throw rocks at people. You know, I have friends go there, get frightened, and start firing off their .357, you know, the thing that was throwing rocks at them in the bush. We've had them whistling at people who got stuck there overnight. Troopers and search and rescue would come in to get the people out, and everybody's going, we had to put up with Sasquatches all night long. So this is a place where that sort of thing has happened. It's a fuzzy photograph, and I don't ever try to convince anybody of the existence of Bigfoot or Sasquatches on the basis of fuzzy photographs. Some people have said, that's all Sasquatch photographs are really fuzzy, and I go, I quote Cliff Barrickman, who makes a joke and says, well, yeah, that's because the nature of Sasquatches, they are fuzzy. But this looks like, to me, adult males can have a thoracic gibbous, a thoracic kyphosis, a forward hunch, especially if they're very, very big, if they're very muscular. The bigger and the more muscular they are, the more likely in like human in pathology and human anatomy, you're more likely to see this. And this is perhaps what we're looking at here. Could be bear. Don't think it's a stump. Don't think it's a bear walking upright. Don't see any ears. We'll talk more about this later. Ed,
How
you have a
tall
question?
is that?
Say what?
How tall are these figures?
Oh, we have no way to scale, but she was taking a picture of a stump. She heard a scream when the flash went off, Tamara said. And yeah, anyway, so I have no reason to doubt her, and I'm just saying this is a possible photograph of Sasquatch. Next one, please, Bill. Gord Guthrie is a Haida, everybody had a Sasquatch sighting in Heidelberg, and to them, they're a little spooked, but some are curious and they don't try to, they don't try to go out and hunt them or anything like that. Matt Moneymaker on Finding Bigfoot talked to some Haidas one time over in Heidelberg, and the young fellow, Osh Edenshaw, who was out deer hunting one day with his little, I think he said a 223, apparently ran into a family and they got quite frightened. You can watch, was it Bigfoot Island or something like that on one of the Finding Bigfoot episodes if you go back. Anyway, Gord was driving down the road one day. Gord and I were both volunteer fire and EMT. And once you work inside a 1,000-degree, burning container with someone or house with someone, you cut through the BS pretty quick, and you're honest with each other about all sorts of stuff. And I've had a couple of EMT fire buddies who've run into Sasquatches, and I have no doubt that what they told me was accurate and true. Gord said, I'm driving past the main logging road in Heidelberg, the Heidelberg River, and it's just out of town. It's only a quarter mile out of town on the paved highway. And he says, I'm seeing, it's a mama gagi and her little guy. The little guy's rolling down the logging road. He's within 30 feet of the highway, and he's doing a somersault. He's somersaulting, and in his hands he's holding the blue top of a 5-gallon, looked like a 5-gallon bucket lid. I thought, that's just amazing. I'd only heard that somersaulting story once before from somebody, Haida, another Haida from Masset, British Columbia, who opened her back door one night this year, Mama, Mama! And there's a little Sasquatch on the back door that suddenly does reverse somersaults off the porch and runs off into the woods. So, and then when Gord backed up, he hit the brakes, he backed up, they were both gone. I'm sure Mama would have said, hey honey, come on, we gotta scoot. It's one of the hairless guys stopping. Next slide, please. Now, Violet Guthrie, and there's the Guthrie name, relative, and Joey Adams, the nephew, Violet's mom, and Mona Paratovich were all in a car who had gone from Heidelberg. They'd driven down at the bottom of Prince Wales up to Kloak. It's a 2-hour drive. to attend bingo with family on a weekend. They'd gone up for the evening and they were driving back. It was around midnight. And on the middle of the island, they're coming down along Cloac Lake. Cloac Lake is where the upside down trees are jammed in the ground. And there must be 30 Sasquatch reports all along the side of the lake. Anyhow, they watch a bunch of deer in the mist crossing in front of the highway, crossing in front of the car on the highway, going from the uphill side down to the lakeside. They slowed for the deer. You don't want to hit them. So they slowed right down to 15, 10 miles an hour. And all of them said, what happened next was just amazing. Tall, lanky, with steam coming off it, is this Bigfoot Sasquatch, Gagit, walking across the highway, just like this, not even looking up. And it just sat down on the shoulder of the road. They're going 2-3 miles an hour now. And Violet says, I could have reached out and leaned out the window and touched them almost. He said, it was just feet away. And half the car is going, oh my God, get out of here, we gotta step on it, we gotta get out of here. And the other half going, slow down, look at it, look, we wanna look. You've got all this variety attitude towards Bigfoot and Sasquatch and Gagit in the car. And it put its hand up. It's almost like it didn't like the light. Now, if you had nocturnal vision or you were running around chasing deer at night, you probably would be night adapted, and even if you weren't especially night vision, you'd be night adapted and you wouldn't want to look at the light. That's what the Sasquatch that I saw on the villa did. It didn't look at the light. It kept its eye. It didn't even turn to look at the car, even though it wasn't that dark in March 1st. Anyhow, she said it was grayish. They all said it was grayish. Built more like a tall basketball player. And it looked like it was just really, really, not sick, but really tired. And they all thought that it had been following the deer. The deer weren't running, it was the Sasquatch, but pretty interesting. Tons of reports. If you want to see a Sasquatch, just camp out on the side of Cloac Lake, during the week, one summer, fall night. Next slide, please, Boone. So my son, I was teaching at the university, and the welding instructor said, my boy, who is my stepson's best buddy, good buddy, is trying to convince me that they had a Sasquatch encounter. And I talked with the kids. The father had flown the kids in a plane. He had them flown to Ella Lake for the boy's birthday. Okay. And he flew all the friends into Ella Lake to the Forest Service cabin, and there's a skiff there that you could row around in. Nobody else was at the lake, and of course you're going to know if anybody else is at the lake because you can hear the plane coming and going. They were there for a week, and on the last day, and they're just fishing, they're rowing around the lake. On the last day, one of the kids, what's that? Looks like a bear standing upright in the trees. But what happened next was clearly not the bear, because the rock that was thrown about 100 yards from shore landed, a baseball-sized rock, landed right in the boat, in the aluminum boat, and bounced around. Needless to say, it got all the guys' attention. That happens a lot, rock throwing, and sometimes quite accurate, especially in remote areas when you've gone in and somebody's trying to say, hey, you're not really welcome here. You've come at a bad time. I've got the kids, listen, could you just go, boom, throw the rock. That's something you hear. Anyhow, next slide, please. So in my first book, I have a description given by 3 women who've been camping at Ward Lake with their kids, and it was they're at the south end of the lake at Signal Creek Campground, and this is back in I want to say the 80s. And the witnesses, I had 2 of them swear affidavits and witness, and they had the kids, and the kids were all asleep in the sleeping bags at the picnic, just at the picnic table, beside the picnic table, summertime. And they thought it was a bear standing up next to on the gravel road that skirts the lake. And but when it started walking toward them on 2 legs, they screamed, realizing it was a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch. They grabbed their kids, threw the kids who were still in their sleeping bags and asleep, put them in the car, and got out of there up to the picnic shelter at the north end of the lake, which is about 3/4 of a mile away. And they thought, oh, we're in a home, if there's a picnic shelter, we'll be fine for the night. We won't take the kids, we can't take the kids all the way back to Ketchikan, the kids will wake up. So they kept the kids asleep in the corner of this Adirondack shelter, you know, concrete floor, and they all went to sleep. Around 12:30, they hear a sound, their axe, it's being dragged on the concrete floor of the picnic shelter. One of the mothers didn't wake up, but the other two were just absent. And they're looking at each other for almost 10 minutes while this Sasquatch walks around the picnic shelter dragging the axe. Horror movie type stuff. Oh, really, you know, it's just absolutely nuts. They didn't move. They stayed awake all night, they said. They just like that. Tina and the other witness. In the morning, they're trying to get out of there. My gosh, there's these great big tracks in the gravel just between the lake, 100 feet away, and the picnic shelter. A ranger comes around, Forest Service, and tickets them for camping in the picnic shelter. And they try to explain, well, there's a Sasquatch that we... Oh, yeah, Sasquatch. Yeah, we have trouble with them, you know. Right. Interesting. It was like Harry and the Hendersons. It's like the cop and Harry and the Hendersons. Oh, they can be very pesky this time of year. You know, the usual skepticism. But anyway, yeah, and apparently this is one of 2 reports that I have heard. They love axes and they mess with them. They'll pick them up, they'll carry them, take them away and bring them back, do all sorts of stuff. They may even try chopping with them. They seem to like to want to imitate what they see loggers doing and whatnot. Next slide, please. Now, Jason Milne swore the affidavit of witness as to what he'd seen and drew a sketch and had me draw a similar sketch. One morning, about 12:30, he'd been staying up late to do some baking for a tribal potlatch that was happening, and he, I need a smoke, so he, his young wife was already asleep. He thought to himself, I'm going to go the edge of Ketchikan. I'm going to go a half block down the street to where my auntie is up. She's always up watching movies until 3 o'clock in the morning. I'll go up and I'll bum the smoke off of her. So he's going out the door of Ketchikan Apartments. It's kind of a 2-story split level at the edge of Ketchikan. And in the single yard light that's over the parking lot, the gravel parking lot, he hears a sound of metal, and he looks over. It's like a clank. And at first he's thinking, is that a bear? Because it's at the garbage can. You know how bears are always trying to get into dumpsters. But what he sees is much broader shoulders than a bear, like a weightlifter, and it's got the dumpster clean off the ground. And it's apparently not lifted it by the handles. He hasn't lifted it by the handles. He's trying to lift it by the lid. And in fact, he bent both lids. You can see the bend in the lid. The people from Ketchikan landfill, they said, no, our machine didn't do that. This dumpster is still there in Ketchikan. If you go up to Bear Valley Apartments, you can look at the lid bend. And I could see where grease marks had indicated that something had tried to there was oxidation here and here. But it was clean off the ground, and Jason said, he shook it. He was trying to get what was in it, whatever, and he couldn't get it open because he couldn't. It's just like that. It's just like the Kwakule stories, Kwak stories of Tsinukwa. They're kind of dumb. Yeah, you can fool them. Anyway, I don't buy that they're dumb, but anyhow, that's the story. And next slide, please. So traditional Kushtaka stories where the land otter man, that's a land otter man in the middle, has captured 2 shipwrecked Tlingit sailors, and he's transforming one of them, who's drowned already, I think, into a Kushtaka. And these are my little pointer's not doing very good. This guy at the bottom here, he's a captured Tlingit shipwrecked soul. And this is the land otter man, who's a transformational Sasquatch kind of creature, shape-shifty. Next slide. That's at a totem park in Ketchikan. So I've got a boat in Ketchikan. It's not this one, it's smaller. This is up near Sitka. The Devils of Thomas Bay. There are stories about the strangest story ever told. Around 1910, prospectors, Harry Culp and his friends went in from Petersburg, and there were neither men nor apes or monkeys, but something in between. And they plagued, it's like the Mount St. Helens miner story kind of thing, okay? Next slide. And this is basically the story. It's really a lot like the Mount St. Helens story, but it's much earlier. It's 1910-ish, 1911, and it was in Alaska. and you can read it in Raincoat Sasquatch, or just try to get a hold of The Strangest Story Ever Told, or you can look for it in a copy of Raincoat Sasquatch. Next slide, please. I'm looking for a copy of my book. So, at the same location as The Strangest Story Ever Told, I interviewed Jim Sprague, who was he'd been a patient of mine, physical therapy patient, in Craig, Alaska. He's passed on now, but I said, Jim, you ever seen a Sasquatch? He said, no. He says, you know, but I did hear an interesting story. He said, I was taking my fishing boat down to Ballard for diesel repair. He thought it was 1951. And the same year his buddy had asked him, he'd asked his buddy, will you come fishing at Thomas Bay with me to do some, salmon fishing? And his buddy said, absolutely no way. And Jim said, how come? And he said, well, you wouldn't believe me. Try me. He said, well, last year I was at salmon fishing on the backside of Ruth Island in Thomas Bay. That's out of Petersburg on the mainland of Alaska in the southeast archipelago. And he says, I had my lights lined up on a deer, on a buck on the shore. I was ready to squeeze on it when this big hairy thing on two legs jumps out of the forest, lands right beside the deer, grabs it, breaks its neck, throws it up under one arm, and jumps back up into the forest. He says, I will never go back to Thomas Bay. At that point, Jim Sprague, good name, right? Sprague. He asked his buddy, he said, have you ever heard of The Strangest Story Ever Told? Because he's thinking maybe the guy's, been inspired by, another Thomas Bay story. And his buddy said, no, what? He denied. Jim was convinced that he hadn't heard that story. Next slide. Now, there was a state wrestling champ kid who was the son of one of my patients, and he's in BC now, but he lived in Heidelberg at the time, and he told me, he said, I've seen one. I was hunting with my uncles. I had 3 uncles in Masset on Haida, which is the Queen Charlotte Island, and that's autonomous, and Haida on the west coast of British Columbia, right up just before the Alaska border. And he said, I had my 243. His family told me this is the only deer he's ever, quote unquote, missed. He's a good shot, solid shot, and it was only like a 60-yard shot through a hole in the bush on the side of the road. And you can shoot, if you're Haida, it's autonomous, so you don't have to go a quarter mile from the road, from the logging road. You can just go and shoot, step on the shoulder and shoot. Anyhow, he shot the deer through this hole in the muskeg, and it dropped, and he was sure he nailed it. And as soon as the shot rang out, almost like a dinner bell, like a Pavlov's dinner bell, this big hairy figure on 2 legs runs in front of the truck. The uncles look at him and say, oh, you better just hold your horses for a minute there. They're just going to stay put. It's about 20 minutes later, they're talking about, well, that was a gagee, and he was headed directly to where the deer, the blacktail, had been shot. And after 20 minutes, the uncle said, well, probably okay to go now, you can get out. They kind of got out, and he went over to walk through the hole that he shot through where the deer had been. There was blood all over, but no deer, picked up and gone. Which is what sometimes you hear tracks associated with that, sometimes not. But in cases where the bullet is one that would have killed an elk or a moose and you'd used it, like a .338 on a blacktail, come on, there's nothing left, you're lucky to get a few scraps and maybe one back scrap. But picked up and carried off. And I've heard of that reliably from Fish and Game in Alaska and BC, where the whole moose was picked up and carried off without any drag mark. And a bear is not gonna whip it over its shoulder like, you know, a Labrador retriever getting a pintail or a mallard in the mountains. Next slide, please. So north of Klawock on Vancouver Island, or on Prince of Wales Island, where we're going back, we have a lot of reports of sightings matching the description of Sasquatches. And while traditional Tlingit beliefs in transformational human-like Kushtaka are well known to scholars and anthropologists, the term Kushtaka has also been used to just talk about Sasquatches. So on a trip on May 9th, 2009 to Klawock on the central west coast of POW, I interviewed Walter Young, a quiet middle-aged man from Kassan. He's a retired fisherman, Prince of Wales. And Walt confided that when he was in his early 20s, sometime in the late 70s, he did a close encounter. Walt is Tlingit and Haida. He had a close encounter with Sasquatch while hunting above Shinnecock, 10 miles northwest of Klawock. He reported that, Walt said, I just killed the biggest deer I'd ever shot when something strange happened. He stated, I had never seen one of these things when I was still growing up, but I heard stories from people I could trust, relatives and others, but folks didn't talk about wild man much. He says, it wasn't until I was a bit older, hunting one fall up in the muskeg north of Klawock above Shinnecock, that I really got a good look at one. Walt said, and he had me draw this. He said, I don't know why. Maybe because I was young and pretty tough, and I had my rifle, or maybe because I had the best deer I'd ever shot, but I wasn't going to stop and let him take it off me. Anyways, he never made a move to me, but he was looking right at me. It was kind of strange. I remember I didn't feel exactly scared, Walt said. He said, I was thinking, nobody's getting this buck. But I do remember the look he was giving me, Walt said. He wasn't taking his eyes off me and my deer, and there was no mistake about what he wanted. I'm pretty sure it was the rifle that kept him holding off, because without it, well, I don't want to even think about that, was his words to me. Yeah, and he said, maybe he even figured I was stealing his deer. I walked away from him, Walt said, down through the muskegs, and he didn't follow me that I could tell. At least he never moved from beside the tree when I looked back, and I never heard him following that I could tell. But I did stop, even though the buck was pretty heavy. But I got back okay. And then I like what he added. He said, the folks, and he'd grown up in both Kassan and up in Klawock, on both of them on Prince of Wales Island. So he had the Haida and the Tlingit perspectives. He said, the folks who know about all the times they, what he called the wild men, have been seen all the way from Klawock Mountain and Shinnecock area, pretty much think that they travel back and forth between those mountain areas in the east and the area north of Shinnecock to the west, with all the caves in there. Paul basically described the creature as tall, broad-shouldered, and covered in black hair, and added that he kept moving with the deer without stopping to fully turn and face the creature, so he didn't really eyeball it. He stated that he kept an eye on the creature, though, while he was walking past it. Probably a good idea, since he seemed to at least have momentarily considered dropping the deer. This would certainly explain why he wasn't able to offer a more detailed description of the face and so on. I really neglected to ask Walt whether he might have recalled some native traditional belief about not looking the creature directly in the eye, as one sometimes hears from older natives, okay? Or even mentioning its name, whether that be Kushtaka or Gagik. Walt did say to me that he certainly thought such wild men had a physical reality, and that on Prince of Wales Island, they would migrate seasonally along mountain ridges to or away from the ocean. Finally, there was one Bigfoot Sasquatch attribute that was implied in Walt's and other reports from all across North America that I've studied and or investigated, and that speaks to their likely intelligence. In effect, they have to be smart. They know what a gun is for sure.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Do we have any more slides at all?
We've come, sorry, but.
Gotta wrap it up?
Yeah, we've hit the 1 o'clock hour.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Dr. Elton, for I'm really excited about this because we are heading, our next expedition to Alaska is July 20th to the 25th, and we're going into this area on Prince of Wales Island. Really looking forward to it. Wonderful, thank you again. How about an intermission? 10, 15 minutes? Sound good?
Thanks so much. I won't step on you.
Hey, Kofi. Yo, my little nugget. You got the good. You ever seen those old ads? Right after him. We'll see when we turn. Are you guys from our No way. No. Thank you for getting that. We'll see you guys out there. Brian, hey, how you doing?
Main person, starboard board.